Namaste and good evening, everyone. One of the words that we come across as we study these marvelous teachings is fragmentation. In our life, somehow, somehow there is so much fragmentation. And many a time, this word may not be all that clear to some people, or even those who have some grasp of what this fragmentation is. There may be a desire to get more clarity. Therefore, I thought it is worthwhile sharing some reflections on fragmentation. As the literal meaning goes, when something is divided, when something has been made into parts, which let us say otherwise is a whole, it is now in parts with some fissures, with some lines, dividing lines, separating one part from the other. Many a time, two parts standing against each other, two parts having some kind of conflict between each other. Therefore, fragmentation implies conflict between two people, two communities, etc. on one hand, and what is worse, it implies conflict within oneself. One part of me as though he is condemning another part. One part of me wants another part to be destroyed. So we are not at ease. We are not at peace. That is the scenario called fragmentation. So these reflections will involve, as you will see, some light on certain connection this topic has with certain other issues. Take, for example, once Krishnaji asked an audience a question, and he himself said, the question was, what is simplicity? And softly he said, honesty. Simplicity is not much to do with whether we wear simple dress or some luxurious expensive dress. Simplicity is not anything to do with whether we go by a cheap car or by some Mercedes or BMW. Simplicity doesn't have much to do with whether we have a wonderful language, flowery language, with appropriate expressions for every topic we want to touch upon, or we have an extremely simple language. So, 100 things which are mistaken for simplicity are actually not simplicity. And Krishnaji answered that day, simplicity is honesty. And that's a deadly answer in a manner of saying. If you define simplicity as honesty, oh my God, there will be hardly anybody amidst us who is simple, because hardly anybody is honest. There is deceit, there is deception everywhere. There is deception between two people, and man deceives himself too. Man goes to two different states of mind, to two different moods of the mind. One time he sets certain goals. I want to get up early, for example. And next morning when the alarm bell rings, He says, "Ah, this alarm bell is so disturbing." He changes his philosophy. Before dinner, a student decides, tonight I'm going to sit for 2 hours with all concentration to study. After dinner, the same student thinks it's better to get up early. So, who said I will study late into the night? And who is now saying I am going to sleep now itself? I can't sit and study at this time. So, it seems that there are two fragments. Many a time there is division between the ideal and the actual. Many a time there is a division between what we show ourselves to be to people and what we actually are, which means there is a hypocrisy. There is living by two standards. That's how, very rightly, Krishnaji said on that morning, simplicity is when there is utter honesty. Honesty in speech, honesty in thought, honesty in actions, which is next to impossible in the world where we live in. How, at the drop of a hat, many of us say something to somebody while the precise truth is something else. It's connected to fear. When we live in fear, it's next to impossible to be honest. When the teacher in a classroom asks, who is that who threw that paper rocket? And the teacher is very angry. And now all the children are afraid. The person, the boy or the girl who threw the paper rocket a while ago was victorious, was feeling jubilant. How the rocket went and landed right on the table, if not on the head of the teacher. But now the same student is trembling. And if the teacher asks him directly, did you throw this paper rocket? The boy says, no, sir. In fact, I came late after this commotion began. He tells a lie. So, in small and big ways, people are dishonest because they have allowed, mark my words, they have allowed themselves behaving in two opposite kinds of ways for some years probably. Some of our bad habits would have begun when we were children of elementary school. Some bad habits began when we were in high school or college. Some bad habits began when, as working adults, we got into some club, to some association, to some friendship. We joined some political party. Somewhere, some association makes us get into a certain habit. Therefore, I have said this topic of fragmentation is connected with honesty. Honesty is further connected to fear. Fear is further connected to habits. Habits are further connected to being mechanical. All of them come together, making us live a fragmented life. Therefore, what is the way out? How do we reintegrate ourselves? One good step to begin with, apparently, is to be more clear in our communication, not through flowery language. I am not saying let your communication be more grammatically correct. Grammar is not so important for being honest. Grammar or some wonderful idioms do not make anybody honest. With or without grammar, grammatical correctness, with or without access to much vocabulary, a person can communicate clearly and transparently. Communication without the foul smell of selfishness. Therefore, communication without the movement of thought is how the teachings express this. And that could be a way to put an end to this dishonesty and to put an end to fragmentation also. So, once more, this topic is so profound, to understand why our lives, our personalities, our behavior got fragmented, why we live a fractured life, we'll have to see that it is so connected with lack of attention. So being attentive, you know, it's better to go a bit slow, but be attentive to whatever we are about to speak. If we are about to speak a lie, but we are highly attentive, we have slowed down to the extent of catching that tendency to speak a lie right at the right time, then we hold back. No, I don't have to tell a lie here. I don't have to deceive this person. I perhaps can find a way to tell the truth in a rather pleasant way, in a way where, yes, he gets a little disturbed, but because I used appropriate and carefully chosen words, he perhaps will appreciate my honesty and will come around. We can have a dialogue. Many a time, if we are not attentive, we are speaking impulsively, mechanically, just going by habit. Then we say something by which any chances of dialogue are obstructed or removed. So, connecting this further to the psychology in which you and I are imprisoned, we are caught in the net of our own psychology. That connection is how attachment to pleasure, attachment to gross sense pleasure, or subtle pleasures on the emotional or intellectual planes can cause fragmentation. Therefore, in all traditional religions, much is said about being, being on guard against pleasure. However, that is not so well understood, and it has led to a whole lot of guilt where perhaps there is no need for guilt, whole lot of hypocrisy where somebody doesn't indulge in pleasure in front of all, but when nobody is around, he goes on a binge. He or she indulges in some kind of pleasure without any limits. So, this criticism in certain traditional schools of thought, uh, criticism of how pleasure is treated in traditional schools of thought, has its own basis. It's not without reason that certain teachers criticize the traditional approach. But then the defendants of traditional approaches cry out in a loud voice that, well, you have not understood the tradition well. So let's not go into this issue of the place of tradition in spiritual you know, education. That's another topic altogether. Coming back, there is this pleasure drive. And again, if you and I have somewhat lived mechanically, sometimes very highly qualified people also act very mechanically. They are used to some form of responding and they just respond the way they did on so many occasions without thinking afresh, without taking fresh stock of the situation on hand. They just act the way they had done before. So we want to examine pleasure, attachment to pleasure. That is when pleasure becomes a dominating factor. Pleasure becomes so powerful temptation in the mind of a man or woman, and then her or his vision gets blurred. You see, fragmentation cannot happen if there is total attention to what is in front of you. When your attention is disturbed, when a certain thought of the prospect of pleasure arises, imagine a certain officer in a government setting has promised somebody or has decided that morning, I will not take any bribe today. I have taken wrongly, today I will be honest. But then when he goes to his office, somebody comes and offers a certain bribe which he never had, that much he had never taken in life. 10 times, 50 times more than whatever bribe he had ever taken. Then, as the expression goes, his mouth waters and he says, if that is the amount this man is giving me, then I will be honest tomorrow onwards. See, the pleasure, because through money, a man foresees the prospect of pleasure. With that much money, I can enjoy this, I can enjoy that. The comforts and conveniences, the standard of living, not to mention some indulgence in gross sense pleasures, eating, drinking, or whatever. He visualizes all of that. And once his weakness for certain pleasure overtakes him, hijacks him, he once more creates a fragmentation in himself. Who was that? Who in the morning, maybe standing at a temple, bowing down before some god form that he worships, had promised, I am not going to take any more bribes. Who was that? And now who is this who brushes aside, who just pushes aside all other arguments from within his own mind or from anywhere else and says, I am just going to take this bribe and put the file of this man on top, put other files to the bottom. I will see that this man's job is done. Oh, see the connection between pleasure and corruption, pleasure and dishonesty, the weakness for some pleasure, and then man, creating more fragmentation in himself. Suppose a man takes bribes or does whatever else with no conflict whatsoever. 24 hours he is at peace with it. Then there is no fragmentation. But we did not analyze the subject of ethics so much. In ethics, in morality, it is said that our true nature is like a child. We are actually like a child. We are innocent. We are good hearted. In certain spiritual literature, they go to the extent of saying, we are by nature divine. We are divine, Devi, not Asuri or Rakshasi. We are Devi. If that word is a far fetched word, leave it aside. Certainly, essentially, it seems very logical that you and I, everyone, every human being, deep in his heart, actually wants to be a loving and lovable person. To hate or to be the object of somebody's hatred doesn't go well with us. Therefore, to visualize, oh, there are people who have no qualms, who have no trace of conflict in their bosom. They can kill, they can loot, they can do anything without feeling even a trace of guilt or conflict is not true. Sometimes some people for a certain period of life might go into that stage. It would be a temporary mental disorder. So you meet a psychologist, you meet a psychiatrist, they will tell you. You meet neurosurgeons, they will tell you. Certain neurologists and neurosurgeons, certain brain dysfunctions, certain brain disorders. Just an hour ago, a bunch of doctors met me, headed by a neurosurgeon of Bangalore, and they were suddenly some topic came up. They discussed various mental disorders, and they said there was somebody who was using his computer daily. But one fine morning, he comes and opens the computer, but is unable to go forward because he forgets his password. There was another very educated person who goes to a market, parks his car, and then goes into the shops. There are hundreds of cars over there. He completely forgets where he had parked his car. So, various forms of forgetfulness. There was one more case. One of the doctors who visited me this evening said to me, or said to the whole group actually, as we were having some coffee together, he said, there are some people who, what is that, who at, let's say, a public place like airport, they see, oh, this toilet is for men, that is for women. Oh, that is for women, this is for men. This is for men, that is for women. Three, four times they look at the two boards, for men, for women. And then this man, let's say he's a man, we don't know what happens to his brain. He just goes into the women's section. And naturally, women would shoo him out, would chase him out, and there will be commotion. Maybe some security person also comes and says, what, sir, why did you do this? And this man is a very educated person otherwise. He also feels very embarrassed. He feels guilty. He says, I'm so sorry. But you expect those people to take that sorry just like that? Even a security guard who is uneducated otherwise will take this PhD person to task. Don't you understand even that much? How could you? That causes even more agitation. The cases we were discussing. Therefore, sometimes moral depravity, sometimes moral fall, sometimes some kind of tremendous distortion in one's moral behavior could happen to brain disorders, brain damages also. Whatever it is, as we study the teachings, we are concerned with what the remedy could be. From a spiritual perspective, on top of everything else, there is this teaching be attentive. Understand what it is to be attentive, what it is to be free from the memories. To remember something is one thing, but to allow that memory to hijack us, to allow what we remember to take us away to another unreal realm. If the memory makes us lose sight of the living present, see, so in order that we keep away, we steer clear of fragmentation, we need to have this ability to steer clear, to not come under the, you know, come under the rule of memories, which means not to be swayed by the past, which means you stay in the present. Much is said about staying in the present. In fact, living in the present, staying in the present, etc., is many times a popular topic. Speakers take it, but not all speakers are able to handle that topic with the adequate depth. They make it an exercise of willpower. Alas, it is not willpower at all. To be attentive is not the result of a decision. I will, next 5 minutes, I will be attentive. If somebody decides, that decision itself becomes a cause of fragmentation. Because that decision, that resolve, that exercise of will sort of reinforces the self in you. You decide to be attentive, maybe wanting to achieve something, maybe wanting to be perfect, wanting to be Mr. Right or Miss Right. You want to be a good person. All of them look like very acceptable goals, but if you examine them on a little deeper level, to decide to be good is not out good, but to decide to be good has a certain artificiality in it. Therefore, it's a very interesting skill, if I may call it a skill. By skill, I don't mean something that comes to us by repetition, by practice. Therefore, it is said the best or the only way, not best, the only way to attention is attention itself. It is not some technique, it's or some method. It's not repeating something again and again. Therefore, friends, if I may share one more dimension which seems to be important to me in this matter of fragmentation, as long as there is a center called the self is operating in us. The self, as we often make it clear, when you write self with a lowercase s, which in popular literature sometimes is called the ego. So as far as or as long as there is the center called the self, it creates fragmentation. Because there is the self, and I am concerned with myself, I am concerned with my image in the eyes of others, in my own eyes too. I keep asking, how good am I? How spiritually advanced am I? How disciplined am I? How virtuous am I? Am I not pretty close to enlightenment? In this way, though these may be very respectable questions in an ordinary sense, but when we are looking at them very sharply, these questions are another way of strengthening your self concern. You are so concerned with your enlightenment. Will I get enlightened pretty soon? I have been into all this study for about 27 years now, somebody says. I'm not talking of anybody particularly. Somebody says, I am into all this, whether it is the teachings of Krishnamurti or Vedanta or Zen or some Sufism, or there are so many schools of wisdom. You and I are very impressed by this teacher or that writer or this speaker and so on. And it gets into our psyche. Wow, I want to be like him. I want to be like her. Well, will I do it? Will I achieve it in this lifespan? When you look at this with a proper magnifying lens, you find that such a thought, will I be enlightened, itself smacks of the self being up and active. Therefore, it can be said that as long as the center called the little self is active, fragmentation is bound to be the state of affairs. Therefore, not deciding, not resolving, not taking, some kind of decision. I'm going to be very attentive and so on. That is very childish. One must see, one must see the problem with inattentiveness. One must see what damage living in the shadow of memories does to us. One must see how living in the past harms us, harms others also in the process. So, seeing the sad aspects of memories, the past, clinging to pleasure, clinging to status, clinging to image. When we see the sad dimension of all this, there is a certain letting go of them. We let go of our seeking pleasure. We are not against pleasure per se, but we are talking of pursuit of pleasure and seeking pleasure, you know, anytime and every time. So it's very different when there is some good food and I am hungry to look at it and say, "Ha, so happy, right? Food has come before me and enjoy it. It's natural." But to linger, when the thought lingers on it, and one starts planning how one may get such delicious food, more than nutritious, delicious, to please the palate. When that kind of becomes dominant, then it does harm. Our intelligence gets dim. You and I need to live in bright, brilliant intelligence. I'm not talking of academic intelligence. I'm not talking of being, you know, very bright in this or that subject, getting gold medals in the universities or later on also this award and that recognition and so on. That brilliance is not of much use, really speaking, in life. In spirituality, the brilliance or the brightness that you and I need to have is to be holistically aware, to be aware of the whole scenario, not how I may become famous, I may become rich, and so on. So, in order that a certain intelligence shines in us, one has to, or we have to, let go of certain childish things we keep doing. And that is when fragmentation also can come to an end. Thank you. I'll pause here. Namaste.
Thank you very much, sir, for such a wonderful lecture. Harshad, sir, would you please like to say something on the topic? Please unmute Harshad, sir.
Yeah, yes. Are you able to hear my voice?
Yeah, yeah, very clearly.
Thank you, Swamiji. I think somewhere in your talk, you said that all our problems are very much related and it comes from this sense of self, me, and that me is separate from you, and that is a kind of a fragmentation. So this self probably, it seems to me, even exists in animals because I saw 2 days ago there was a dog which belonged to a rich person, and that dog was taken for a walk by a servant. And when all the stray dogs saw this well fed dog, they started barking. They did not like that dog, which was given special attention and he was well fed, and the stray dogs are starving. You can see even sometimes their bones coming out. So, even among monkeys and other animals, there is this sense that I am more important than you. And I saw one dog, a man was giving biscuits, and there were three dogs, and one dog was climbing on the feet of the person who was giving biscuits, and that dog felt that he was more hungry, he wanted more, he should be the first. And also monkeys also fight. And so we come from animal world, it seems, according to evolution theory. Probably we also have this sense of self, maybe not at the beginning when we are born, we don't know anything, but as we grow old and we begin to distinguish that this is mother, this is the father, brother, sister, attachment to the family, and the name, and all that. Um, and then the conflict also starts in the life of a student, as Swamiji said, that most students, they don't like to go to school. I myself did not want to go to school, but you have to go, and that is same for all students. And then there is a conflict, and then there is a fear of examinations, fear of what other people talk about you, comparison, competition. And so we are living in this kind of fragmented society, and we are born into a fragmented society, and we naturally, without our awareness, we gather all this sense of self, and we feel that that is quite natural. And sometimes you see that there is a long line to buy some ticket or some grocery, and somebody comes and he wants to be the first in the line, though he comes later. So I have seen that all thing happening in society, and everybody wants to be somebody by comparison better than other people. And so this fragmentation, it exists in all of us, and we get conditioned by our religion, by our nationality. And I myself felt it not when I was in India. I never thought about that I am an Indian or a Hindu, but only when I went out to America, and then I begin to see that I am different, they are different, they look different, their culture is different, my culture is different. So all that conditioning, we become aware when we go to a place where the culture, everything is different. And so I went through this kind of culture shock, and I was not able to look at my inner world also. But it was a book of Krishnamurti where I began to read, and Krishnamurti was saying that humanity has suffered through for thousands of years all these problems of fear, anger, jealousy, loneliness, and and Krishnamurti said, "You are not a Hindu or a Chinese or American. You are a human being, and you have acquired all this conditioning by living in the society, and you have not really investigated, not looked inward to look at the cause of this suffering." And Krishnamurti was saying that the cause of suffering is this sense of self, that me. And then something beautiful he said is that this me is coming from thinking. And so if you want to be really verify what Krishnamurti is saying, that this sense of self or me is coming through thinking, one needs to go right at the root from where thinking is coming. And that means one has to really be very, very curious and observe how these thoughts are arising. And so, and to observe that, it itself requires kind of a inward looking curiosity, honesty, energy, all these qualities are required. And most people are not able to even sit alone and turn the attention inward. But maybe I was able to do that because I was doing my PhD, I was doing science work, and I was curious to verify what Krishnamurti was saying, and I found that what he was saying was correct, that our problems are coming from thinking, but it is possible to observe this thinking from a different dimension than thinking. And that different dimension exists in all human beings, but is not awakened. And so there's a lot of intellectual understanding happens of even Krishnamurti teachings, and sometimes it creates even more conflict because one can see that what Krishnamurti is saying is true, but there is no method to come out from thinking and look at thinking clearly. So only when some people, when they want to give their whole attention to look, not to try to change oneself, but just to look at what is happening in this mind, why these thoughts are arising, and uh, how they are changing these thoughts. So only when such curiosity comes in our life, and then maybe a different kind of a dimension arises in us, which is not thinking, which Krishnaji would call awareness. And in that awareness, there is no self, there is no division, and it is not a thing. Awareness is not a thing. And so, when that awareness or intelligence comes, then we begin to see everything very clearly, and we see why people are fighting, why we are unnecessarily getting angry. So one can even watch the anger. If a student, and I'm a teacher, and a student says something very unpleasant to me, and if this anger is arising, and if that awareness or attention is not there, then I will naturally get angry and react. But when this dimension of looking clearly, non verbally, this awareness or attention, whatever we call it, when that happens, then the anger arising can be seen at the time it is arising, not later on. Because sometimes people get angry, they do something damaging, and then they feel that they should not have been angry. But that is the intellectual understanding. So, same way it is with smoking or drinking and many damaging things which we do to ourselves, and that creates these problems in even in family, so much conflict, division exists. And I read it in every day in the local newspaper that people are fighting and they are not really able to look deeper within themselves and ask this question, that is it possible to be free from anger, fear, jealousy, loneliness, comparison, competition. So our education does not encourage this kind of looking inward with curiosity. And Krishnamurti was always pointing out, how do you look? How do you listen? How do you learn? And he was not talking about academic subjects, but looking inward clearly from a different dimension than thinking. And that is the difficulty most people have, how to come out from the plane of thinking and feeling and to look at thinking clearly. And Krishnamurti says there is no method. So, of course, there is no method only when instead of reading Krishnamurti, we begin to observe. Of course, initially we need to read Krishnamurti, but much more is looking at our inner world and seeing the truth of what Krishnaji is saying. And when we are able to do it, then we say, of course, what Krishnaji says is correct. And then we don't need to read Krishnamurti because it is what Krishnaji is talking about is about our own life, how problems which we create because we are not aware of what is happening. So the whole teachings are about looking inward, seeing clearly how our thoughts are coming, and then it seems to me that there is a clarity comes in looking at the trees or looking at everything, the cloud or the children and the beauty which is around us, nature, all that comes when there is some change happens within our brain by this looking inward. So a different quality of brain comes into our life, which makes our life more enjoyable and very creative. And it can help in studying all the subjects, whether it is science or mathematics, technology. Because if the mind is very good, if the mind is very clear, then learning is effortless, it seems. And the whole that kind of learning doesn't happen in school and college, and that is why the knowledge which students acquire in school and college, it becomes a burden, and life becomes full of habits, bad habits, drinking, smoking, drugs, and all that. So I think I have finished. uh,
So no voice is coming.
Okay. Are you able to hear now?
Yeah,
Are
yeah.
you able to?
No voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have finished saying that there is a conflict everywhere in the world among internationally between India and Pakistan and America and Russia and Arab and Jews. Conflict exists in every human being, but the only solution is not working outside, but working within oneself, looking clearly, being free, and then we cannot do much about the conflicts which exist in other human beings. Even Krishnaji talked for 60 years. I don't think he was able to really make people free or free from conflicts. Because I worked in Krishnamurti schools and I saw there was conflicts everywhere in Krishnamurti organizations also. So the only thing is that we have to look in within us and not blame other people for our problem. And there is a possibility of seeing clearly and looking without thinking, looking at a tree or a human being. Okay, I have finished. Thank you very much.
For more information, Waghmare, you are welcome. Give some more information on it.
Are you able to hear me, sir?
Yeah, very well. No problem.
Thank you very much that you have said that I will give more information and not any insight. Okay. Uh, in my views, already Swamiji and Harshad sir have covered most of the things, and it is a natural thing. Fragmentation is a natural process. Whether it is a question of outer world or whether it is a question of inner world. In outer world, we see that there are various different species and different many things. So same thing, brain is just recording it. Brain just records it, and so it is also natural. Thought is also natural, and in that, whatever is there is also natural. So fragmentation in one way is natural, but fragmentation also creates conflicts and disputes and all the things which Harshad sir has said mainly. And Swami has also said about something traditional. I will come to that, but later on. First of all, what JK has to say in short, JK also confirms this thing, and there is a clutch in that which we will discuss. JK says, as long as there is center, there must be fragmentation. As the me and the you and conflict is in that relationship. This we already discussed. The activity of thought must inevitably bring fragmentation. One realizes this, and therefore one says there must be no integration. There must be integration, which is yet another form of fragmentation. An attentive mind, when it has gathered all energy, this point has to be noted, all energy, because nobody has touched this point of energy. Unless you are having total energy, free energy, you cannot drop the thought, or you cannot work on the, you cannot reduce the effect of thought. Has no fragmentation. An attentive mind, when it has gathered all energy, has no fragmentation. Only when there is fragmentation is there the dissipation of energy. So the main reason is why we are worried about or why we are discussing this fragmentation is dissipation of energy, which we have to see. The movement of thought in any direction is a movement towards breaking up and fragmentation. The solution is to observe the thought structure and free from it. Do not pursue pleasure for next day, end it, as one day's need becomes pleasure for another day. This point is also covered by Swamiji. And why it becomes that? JK says, I entered a room and a beautiful thing catches my eye, and I say it gives me great pleasure. I look vague shadows, etc. Now, why this thing becomes important? Because it gives me pleasure. So I want pleasure throughout life. I decide the priorities, and I want pleasure throughout life. I do not see pleasure is thorn. So as long as the mind is pursuing pleasure as the me, how can I see this whole thing as life? So I see the central factor that when one thing becomes all important, then I do not see the whole of life. So why one pursues pleasure at any cost? There is nothing wrong in pleasure. We need good, clean food. What is wrong in that? But what happens? I say I must have it tomorrow also. So today's biological need becomes tomorrow's pleasure. So one has to understand this, and then thinking comes into picture, which is the factor. So thought sustains it. Thought is essence, in essence, is the maker of fragment. So act and forget it completely. Drop the thought. So he says, drop the thought. In my views, unless there is a fresh energy, one has to see how much he is able to drop the thought. What Harshad sir says, that it is that clarity comes and one can see the tree without thought and all that. That is, I think, in my views, it is the first stage. Second stage is to understand the thought structure. And then once you understand the thought structure and you are having the energy, fresh energy, then you will be able to drop that thought. There comes the wisdom which segregates the important thought, and it segregates the what is not important. So that is the right thinking, what JK said elsewhere. And one thing is we have to understand about the tradition. Tradition has not given much importance to fragmentation. They already they always give they say that you to some extent you control this thing and go for the mainly the energy, the medium which is behind this, which is creating all this nuisance or all these things. So what a Gyani says, in Gyanmark they say Pragyanam Brahma. Means Pragya is also a sort of energy with wisdom, which Krishnamurti has said intelligence. In Rajyog they say Chiti Shakti, means the energy is the main thing. In this Tantra, they say Shiv Shakti. Means again they focus on the Shakti. And in other this Bhakti Marg, they say that Bhagwan of Bhakta and Devi. So Devi is the creator and Bhagwan is the intelligence behind it. Even your Upanishad says Purnat Purnamidam Purna Vimuchyate. So that also means everything is Purna. And from that Purna, Purna is created. So what is, although we see the fragmentation, but what is behind that? What is behind the thing which is unifying it? And what is the base or what is the agency which is creating this? What is the entity, real entity which is creating this? That one has to see. Thank you.
Chidanandji, would you please like to say something on this energy?
Yes, first of all, I compliment Dinesh Waghmare ji. He did add quite a lot of information, and also I appreciate him saying something about tradition. Yes, tradition. I also said at first sight, tradition seems to ask us to control, which Dinesh ji very carefully said. To some extent, it asks us to control. He's politically right there because the tradition also has, a grosser side and a subtler side. Even we use advanced Vedanta and preliminary Vedanta and so on. So without going too much into those things, yes, I think to some extent control is in the initial stages. In advanced stages of traditional spirituality, not only Vedanta, in so many other schools of spiritual thought, in advanced stages, as the student discovers the finer dimensions of the subject, the control becomes less and less, and change through understanding takes the front stage. Change takes place not so much by control, but by understanding. All right. In Harshadji's submissions also, I liked what he said was if we simply read Krishnamurti, go on reading, that is no way of bringing about true change. Sometimes we fall in love with words, fall in love with some examples, some illustrations, some phrases. I myself at times have highly enjoyed just the titles of various Krishnaji's books. Flight of the Eagle makes you curious. Oh, what has he said about Flight of the Eagle? And then you discover some very beautiful teachings are conveyed through comparing the way of the intelligence with the flight of the eagle. The bird doesn't leave any marks in the sky as it flies. Likewise, the awakened mind will not have any residues as it goes through pleasure, pain, honor, insult, etc., that kind of teaching. Therefore, to complete that remark, we must not just be in love with these books and words and lectures and audios and so on. Essentially, what is required is kind of stepping back from getting stuck with words. Step back and ask a more fundamental question. I love this passage, that is good, but what do I mean by I love this passage? What is going on in me? Am I becoming a fan of the person who is saying this, or am I able to assimilate the message and quietly letting go of all ideas, all images of either Krishnamurti or any other person who said something beautifully? Letting go of those images of persons and personalities, is it possible for me to stay in that kind of watchfulness? Am I aware of my own fragmentation, for example? Am I aware of how I become very concerned with my name, my popularity, my being accepted, my being complimented? I go to a gathering. I'm talking of anybody among us, not I myself. Any of us goes to some gathering and our mind has a thought. I hope many friends will come over to me and say something appreciating what we did recently, where we went recently, and this way express some awe. If somebody among us went to Mahakumbh and came back, and nobody in the town cares to even ask, when did you come? How was it? Not all can take it. Whereas if a good number of people, hey, you went to Mahakumbh, how was it? Etc. If they show some excitement, typically, the person gets, becomes very happy. So there is this seeking of attention, seeking of approval. You and I seek recognition in very gross way or in some subtle ways. Therefore, the important thing is to be aware of this process of seeking, the seeking going on. And along with seeing, if I may say one last point, we are all the time trying to avoid pain. As we are in a social gathering, somebody with a soft drink in his hand starts moving towards us, and we remember last time he was so nasty with us. He came and tried to pull our leg in all kinds of ways. So as he comes towards us with the soft drink in his hand, we tend to go away from that spot. We don't want him to come and once more say some, unpleasant statement. So that means what? There is a certain fear, certain, tendency to avoid. Sometimes we may have to avoid some people practically. I don't say we should never avoid anybody. Otherwise, as you say in Hindi, right? "A bail mujhe maar. A bail mujhe maar." There is one statement. Come on, ox. Come on, bull. Hit me. That would be so foolish when human beings can sometimes be worse than that bull. And sometimes we need to avoid some people. But otherwise, why should we avoid anybody? Why should we be afraid of anybody? Have we become so enslaved to praise and praise and praise? And have we become so allergic to the least criticism, even if it's constructive criticism? Sometimes we discover, yes, I've become so attached to pleasure, comfort, praise, acceptance, and I don't want any non acceptance. Somebody disagrees with me. I don't want to have anything to do with him in life. That kind of extreme positions we take, I think a certain wonderful transformation begins when we are intensely aware of that kind of prejudices, likes and dislikes. It's all thus about awareness. In awareness, fragmentation can come to an end. In mechanical living, fragmentation can go from bad to worse, it seems. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can I
Fact
say
requires
something here?
backing. Fact requires backing. Wait a minute, Waghmare sir. Fact requires backing by Krishnamurti, by Ved, by Upanishad, or by some great literature. Otherwise, it doesn't stand. I am asking.
Are you using the word wetting, Whetting, or waiting?
No, fact requires weight from Veda and Upanishad and Krishnamurti. If it is not backed by Krishnamurti, Upanishad, or Veda,
Oh,
it doesn't
oh.
stand. It is not sufficient that if you mention fact, it is sufficient. Why it requires that it was said by this, or otherwise you say, I differ. Krishnamurti said this, but I still differ. Why this type of language is needed? If
Hmm.
you are saying fact, fact should appeal.
Hmm. Anyone may please answer this.
Pradeep, Pradeep.
Yeah. I would like to say something on this. Basically, one thing we have to understand that people are become very ignorant nowadays. They don't go deep and they don't want to see the fact. They whatever they have heard or whatever they have listened, they simply repeat that and they make their own ideas basically. Say for example, right now he has said, our Swamiji has said, flight of eagle. This is very good and we become in love with it. But when we say Vihangam mark of tradition, which is the same thing, which is Vihangam mark, there are three marks they have mentioned: Piplika mark, Markat mark, and Vyangam mark. So when you go into deep, Vyangam mark is similar to flight of eagle, what Krishnamurti has said. So this gap, who will break this gap? Otherwise, somebody has said that tradition is useless. So you will also you say that it is useless, because superficially you have also not gone into that, and you only see the somebody says that what is the there in going to mandir or something, and that what mantra, even the people who are there, pujari
Nothing,
and all that,
nothing,
they are
nothing
also
has
useless.
nothing has been said by me like this. What
No.
you are answering me is not said
Mhm.
by me. I just said
But
fact requires baking. Number of times we say in Upanishad this is said, or flight of eagle is to be given three more complications and then say like this. Why it is so? Just I am asking.
because by what we can say, इसके बहाने कुछ और डिटेल्स दे दिए जा सकते हैं, जैसे शक्ति कुमार जी बोलते हैं,
Those are the
इसके बहाने ये
information.
चीजें बोली जा
नहीं,
सकती है कि ये चीजें
if
हैं.
if I call them information, what is wrong in it? What is wrong in it? Now
Nothing
now
is wrong.
please now please let Pradeep ji say something.
Okay. Thank
Thank you
you.
very much, Waghmare.
Thank you.
Very important, rather the most important topic today. And you see, partly it was touched by Dinesh to start with, that it is natural, it is natural. That is the only part I agree with him. It started with them. Then otherwise, what we have seen today, what I have listened to, is knowledge and a review of what JK said anytime. This fragmentation has been discussed thousands of times. Not once, thousands of times, and there are videos and all sorts of. Now, I come to the basics, what JK said. You are the what? First, I'll talk about whether it is natural. Natural forces, nobody comes and talks like this. After having this knowledge, so much knowledge, scriptural, academic, this knowledge, that knowledge, reading this and that, what am I today, what I have to say today? I will tell you what I have to see, what I have seen, what I have to tell you. This thing, it's important. Natural forces are affecting sun, wind, water, and all that. Physical forces are also causing fragmentation, affecting human psychology, survival. All that has happened, if nobody can deny it. So societal fragmentation, different locations, different environments. You see, we are nature only, the part of nature. But we talk as if we are different than nature. So this is then fragmentation, we all know. I can't believe it. Most of us are so well read and pretty educated people. And you see that this fragmentation is political, social, religious, and whatnot. Sushil also talked about it just now. Why are we talking about this whole review on history? Every time sitting on the shoulder of JK and then talking, so you have nothing, you have not seen anything. We have not seen anything. We don't see this fragmentation, what it has done in the society today, in me, around me, in the family, families, individuals competing with each other. Have I not seen? Have you not seen these things, or you need reference? You see? So this is seeing is believing. And so many things are there. When perception is action, we have been seeing this since centuries. What action has happened? What action is there? Individual and even cooperative at the level of government and the rulers. What are they doing? Why we are not able to see is so very clear, because our seeing has been covered with images. Now more of those things are happening now. Our seeing, we don't see, we have become blind with images. Don't we see this? Don't we see this? We go on quoting this thing and that thing. So this knowledge has created blindness of a different nature. Don't we? Tell me what you can't see. Tell me what all of you know what has fragmentation, what it has done. But what has happened? What is today? Where there more fragmentation or there is less fragmentation? So this is, you have to see we have to discuss at each one of us, what do I see after this knowledge, having knowledge in me, reading this and that, present in my day-to-day life. what do I see? Talk about that. That is then only in this fraternity, in this close group of people who can think, who think about, but mostly it is in the form of thinking. Thinking what to do, thinking what to do, what type of knowledge, what type of education should be there. Only thinking, thoughts. After seeing what happens, immediately there is a thought. And we are saying that one has to, emptiness of course is there. It comes naturally also, emptiness. To be filled by something or the other, either my interest or something, some signal in the environment. So this is, we have to see, we have to be actually, we don't, this, then only there can be something. There can be something. At my level, do I do these things? Do I live what Krishnamurti I have learned through him and before him also? It's not that only everything I have learned from reading this or that. I have never met Krishnamurti. A great regards for that fellow. He was a great seer. He could see it, but what happened afterwards? So we have to be very, very, now this is the time when we should stop this historical account. Where was he, what he was doing, how he was taken from here to there and there and all sorts of things. But are we able to see that you are the world, what proportion I have in my life? Observer is observed what proportion I have in my life. First step is the last step, what proportion is there in my life? How do I live it? Do I live it habitually? How much of it is habitually? How much it is new? Do I want new things? How many people want new things? So we have to be very, I'm sorry if I have used certain harsh words, but this is what I've seen and what I see regular basis. Thank you very much, friends. Thank you. Enough time.
Prasad sir, please come forward and say. 6 minutes are left for you.
Namaste, sir. Firstly, I think I have a lot of appreciation for the question raised, for at least what I understood to be the question. You know, it may or it may not be the question he raised. The question raised by Sushil. When there is something, when there is a fact, does it require the support of some scripture or tradition or statement of seer to say this is a great fact? A fact stands on its own legs. It doesn't require any support. This is, I thought, what Sushilji has said. Anyway, I leave it at that. I am not going to go into that question. I go into this topic, fragmentation. What I understood of this fragmentation. Sir, fragmentation is all around us. You see, there is a fragmentation on the basis of languages, on the basis of religions, tribes, castes, everywhere. Nations. The earth is divided. The earth is fragmented. This is from earth, nations, states, and estates. This is my estate. This much is my fort, my palace, my house. You can't enter this. So like this, as Mr. Waghmare has said, fragmentation is very natural. It has become natural. So all around us, there is fragmentation. Firstly, there is biological fragmentation. I am separate from you, you are separate from me, etc. And then there is psychological fragmentation. I have my past. You have your past. I have my belief system. You have your belief system. So this is how we are all divided. Then what is the source of this division? I think Swamiji has said it. It is the self that is creating this division. The self in each one of us, the ego in each one of us, is creating the division. Each one of us is in pursuit of his own ambition, his own acquisition, his own sexual urges, his own pleasure hunting, his own fears. All these things come. So, my psychological world is different from your psychological world. That is a division. So, but then nature doesn't really allow this division. In life, when we breathe the same air. We take the same water. All these things. And then ultimately, they say we are born from stardust. The same stellar dust has created all of us. Is it not a unifying factor? Ultimately, when we die, we are all leveled into the same earth. Is it not a unifying factor? So, we have created divisions, but nature is, in a way, forcing us to see the reality of unity in our lives. We are not prepared to remember that, to see that. And that is the illusion in which we live. I think Mr. Waghmare will be using the word Maya, because the tradition uses that word Maya. That is the Maya in which we all survive, lead our lives. Then Krishnamurti has tried, I think, to enable us to get over this fragmentation. His teaching is entirely to help us get over this fragmentation. Like he said, you are the world. So if you want, and he has also explained why or how you are the world. If we see how we are the world, is it not a unifying factor? Are you not getting over fragmentation? Similarly, he says, you are the past. Don't live in the past. We are the past. I am the past because I carry the memory of my parents. You carry the memory of your parents. You live in your past, I live in my past. That is making us fragmented, divided. So, the present doesn't have that weakness. The present is common. I see the same present, you see the same present. We have a common vision when we are seeing the present. But when we are seeing the past, you are divided, I am divided. So, how to get over this self? Tradition has talked of self with a big S. Krishnamurti talked of only a small s, self with a small s. Because I can appreciate the existence of a small s, because I can observe it. I can observe it in each of my activities. When I deal with my servant, when I deal with my boss, when I break a queue, when I am eager to stand first in any queue, all this. So, when you give examples, it becomes funny. And it can hurt also our sentiments. So, we don't want to go to that extent. So, sir,
Sir, please end it because Harshad Parekh is raising hand and I have to give time to.
okay,
Please.
sir. So,
And for you, I am sleepy, but Krishnamurti is master of Maya. If you read it, you will be enjoying that.
okay,
Master
sir.
of Maya. Through
Okay, sir.
nature, he has
I will end it only with one
taught everything.
statement.
Okay.
There is fragmentation at all levels, but nature is forcing us to get over that fragmentation. And the Krishnamurti's teaching is how to get over that fragmentation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Harshad sir, would you please end it now?
Yeah, just
Please.
1 minute.
Okay.
Swamiji mentioned The Flight of the Eagle, and that was the book which I first read. And in that, Krishnaji said, the eagle in its flight doesn't leave a mark, the scientist does. So, Krishnaji, in a way, saying that scientists, they are doing good work, but there are many assumptions and a lot of area which is not very clear. It is not truth. But the mystic, means the eagle, it doesn't make any effort to see clearly. And so that is the energy which goes in investigating the matter and making many things available, like flight to the moon or the Mars. It's the same energy when it goes in looking at the thinking itself, then there is some extraordinary changes begin to happen. So the mind of the scientist is not turned inward. And so the scientists also go through many problems in their life, many psychological problems. And I have seen that scientists who were very great, but they were not happy. They wanted, desire more recognition, money, and all that. But the mystic, the eagle, it doesn't want anything. It feels happy to just look and listen and learn. And that is the beauty. And that can happen only when all that energy which is going out, when it turns inward, there some changes happen. That is what I was a scientist, but I was interested much more in investigating outside than inward. And so that really helped me very much, Krishnamurti's teachings. And I feel that it's not necessary to keep on reading Krishnamurti. One has to read the book of our own life, how it is unfolding everything, day by day, So, okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir. Modak, would you please end it now? Thanks to all participants.
Thank you.